Now, today we're taking a look at how to think abstractly when we're composing and even painting our painting. A good landscape painting is made up of a variety of different shapes, and if we think about them abstractly, it's easier to think that way. The minute we get so caught up in this being a tree, this being a silo, barn, grass, we get into the mode of just trying to render it to look like that. But if I can think more in terms of shape when I see these, I'm going to force myself to think more in terms of a variety of shapes that work abstractly together. Because that's one element of composition, is to really think about just basic shape without forcing them into a realistic format of barns, trees, sky, and so on. So good abstract painting is good in the sense that it does see a variety of shape, how you arrange those shapes and sizes and values. We do need to think more abstractly. So I'm going to take a look at some of these photographs here that we can use during this lesson. Now, first thing, since we work with photographs so much anymore, first thing we want to do is see how to compose to make things work more abstractly. And in this reference, the interest is all in the barn here, some of the silos and a little bit of the trees, but more than half of the painting is grass and sky, which takes up way too much room. So I can think horizontally here. What I don't want to do is encompass everything, which is what this photograph does. The tree, all the barns, they all fit into the picture plane. Nothing is cropped, with the exception of the top of that silo. It's almost more of a tangent than a good cropping. But it helps to leave something hanging off an end and the top, because too often everything looks like it's squeezed into a can of sardines if everything just fits. And that's the problem with this photograph, everything fits. So if I want to think horizontally here, because there's a lot going on horizontally. Let's crop part of that silo. I'll include all of the smaller silo, trying not to create a tangent. I'll cut off the tallest, and then I'll cut off part of the barn. And what that does, that lets things run off. It runs off on the left side for the silo, and runs off here on this barn. So it looks like there's more space. I've also created more sky than grass, which is fine because I want to focus on the tall barn and the silo and the trees. If I didn't want to focus on those, I could lift this up and have more foreground, more grass, and have less sky. So again, you can crop it either way, but here the horizon line is well below center, more sky. I could lift it up here, have a lot more grass down here, and hardly any sky up there. What you just want to stay away from is just having the horizon line dead center, or having half sky, half foreground or grass. You want to stay away from that. So decide what's more important, the foreground or the upper part, sky, whatever's in the sky, trees, buildings in this case. But this makes a good horizontal composition. The real tall stuff on the left is balanced by the trees over here on the right. There's a lot going on in here, which looks like a lot of detail, but even this detail in here, I want to create, or I want to think about it abstractly. Small dark and light shapes that give me a variety of shapes and sizes, like these poles, this dark shape, this smaller dark shape, this lighter shape. So I can think in terms of dark and light pattern when it comes to stuff like this. And I really like this kind of stuff. These old barns, you have the dark railings against the lighter tin. You got the tree trunks against the dark pieces of wood. And if you can see a pattern in it, an abstract pattern, as opposed to just trying to put in all the details. Same thing with the tree here. You got the trunks, and then the smaller branches. But what you have is a good kind of abstract view of dark and light pattern. Lighter, small branches into shape with darker background. So I want to think about how to do that, how to think about it abstractly. It makes it easier to paint, and I'm less involved in thinking, well, there's railings here, there's tin, there's a board there, and pretty soon you're bogged down to each individual aspect and shape as opposed to seeing it as a whole in terms of pattern. There's a lot of dark and light pattern in there. If I can simplify it, it's going to work better. Here's the other composition. The one previously was a long horizontal. Now what I want to do is, this is more of a square. But I'm doing the same thing. I'm letting the barn run off on one side and letting the silo run off on top. And this has a lot of nice elements to it. The fence row leading in, the strong angles on the barn here, the angle of the telephone wire line. I might even lower it and put it down like that. These variety of shapes in the silos give you several different shapes. So there's a lot going on angle-wise, angles of lines. And also, like we said, in these areas where there's a lot of detail, if I can see a pattern of dark and a pattern of light against that dark, it makes it easier. Again, thinking abstractly really helps simplify all that detail and all the shapes going on in here. So one thing I can do also, if I kind of flatten things a little bit, just simple dark and light pattern. I've raised up the background, those violet trees, simplified the value and the shapes. I'm seeing a pattern of dark and light, the lighter grass against the darker grass, simplifying inside here in the barn where I got that dark shape and a shape of light. Getting rid of some of the detail, but I like that pattern of dark and light, kind of the abstract shapes it makes. And I can decide what to leave in, what to put out. But that idea of just reducing things to simple shape, even flattening them out a little bit, which is kind of what we do in the block in. When we're blocking in color, we get just flat shapes. But I can create that pattern a lot more simple in a thumbnail drawing to see how things are going to be arranged. But there's a lot of contrast in here, a lot of variety of shapes. Makes for a good abstract painting. Here's an example of some abstract thinking. This is an abstract painting. Well, it's not really abstract. It's a street scene. Street coming down here and then there. And then horizon up in here with some houses and rooftops. This is a painting by Richard Dieberkorn, painted during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Abstract, but using some realism in there, but his main focus is just the abstract, arranging abstract shapes. So you got the shape of the blue sky, shape of the green, little dots and dashes of orange, street dark and light, but he's thinking more abstractly and flattening out everything so that the composition is still the most important thing here. And the dark and the light also helps composition. It gives you the value changes that you need in composition. But still, some realistic elements to it. And all his work was that way. And it varied. This is another one here. Again, kind of a flatness to it. Also cared about paint quality, dragging, scrubbing one paint over another so the stuff underneath comes out. And all this can be used in realistic painting too, but it helps, you can see, in terms of the composition of thinking abstractly in terms of the shapes. All his compositions work real well. There's always a variety of lines and angles in here that really help with the composition. So think abstractly while your subject matter may still be thinking realistic subject, but not to the point, at least at first, where that makes your painting just full of details. Think abstractly at first so we can kind of sort through clutter in a painting and decide what's important and what's not. And I've got a couple of other images here, boat scenes from Greece. And what I like here, and I always have a reason why I like something, but I like this shape. And I'm thinking abstractly, but I like this boat, the big dominant shape, and then the cast shadow on this boat and the sunlight over there, and the pattern of just dark and light underneath the barrels and the wood and all that stuff. What I don't like is everything else. The car here, whatever that is there, the background, just way too cluttery. So I want to think of a way to make it work. But I created just an abstract background. Nothing there at all. I would have this light flat plane here just gradually blend into there. But But I'm using 2 or 3 values of violet with 2 or 3 values of green, just kind of dragging them over each other. What I want the background to be is a dark foil, make these lighter shapes pop out, and then a light foil to make some darker shapes pop out. In other words, I don't want the background just one solid value in color. Several different colors, and I chose green and violet. They'll stay in the background and they'll mute each other slightly. But the big thing is the value. It's dark enough that these lights stick out in here, but yet it's light enough that these darks stand out. So I don't have anything in the background that's too dark or too light. It's kind of a middle value. And that creates just kind of a foil in the background to make what's important stand out, and that's the boats. Same thing with the foreground here. Got rid of this thing here, this car over on the left side. Just continue this barrel. You know, if you have half a barrel there, you can pretty much figure out what the other half would look like. So I'm not really doing anything there. And I put a couple of boards in here and some wood underneath to hold up this boat. It had some kind of metal thing that I can't see in there, that white, probably a boat carrier or whatever you call it. But anyway, I just put the boards up there and the logs to hold up the boat, which is how they did everything in Greece. When something was being worked on, it was just propped up on either cans or wood or stumps. And all this down in here creates a nice pattern of dark and light shapes. You got the light green showing through, the dark shapes, but you can see the pattern of dark and light. Some of it is 2 or 3 different values of dark, and some of it is just a real strong light and dark. That gives me the contrast in there. But I'm seeing pattern and shape in here. And I got rid of a lot of the detail in there, but I could simplify that and create a more simple pattern that kind of works abstract. I really like this kind of stuff right in here, all this dark and light pattern. Even within the shadow, there's 2 or 3 values in there that kind of, I can see pattern, kind of an abstract shape. It makes it easier to show, to paint. So getting rid of the clutter and reducing everything to just what's important. The other one here, very similar, interested in this boat here, so I want to get rid of all this clutter back in here. Way too much stuff. So I'm going to emphasize this tree and make it bigger, and I'll keep this roof and building, but get rid of everything else behind it. And I need to break up the foreground some. A little bit too blank. Sun's, it's not real low, but it's low enough that I could get away with some cast shadows in here to kind of break up the foreground. So first thing I did here was, well, it's pretty much all that I did. I think I added that tree there. I could add windows where that tree is. I think the tree works a little better. It's bigger and allows these lighter areas on the boat to stand out more. But you can see the tree back in here. That tree gets rid of all those buildings and creates a backdrop for the boat to stand out against. Lights coming that way. So I know the shadows on these trees are going to be on that side. Keep it simple though, just simple pattern, dark and light. Think about the direction of the light when you're setting up values. But again, I have all this clutter in here, and I will pick this darkest dark and some of the lighter dark, and then the real bright light, I'll pop a few of those in there. But that simplifies that clutter underneath. It kind of suggests it, but I can think in abstract patterns of that dark and light to create all that clutter underneath. And I'd get rid of a lot of it. Get rid of a lot of this stuff and have just simple, bigger shapes of dark and light. But I also wanted to, value-wise, to cut down on so many lights. The boat, I want to be the lightest. I don't want anything competing with that. But in this photograph, the gravel is too close to the white of the boat, and a lot of the light back in here, the white trim and the real light yellow, it just competes with the white boat. And I'm not interested in that, so don't hesitate to get rid of it. which I did down here. I made the dirt a lot, or the gravel. Maybe I turned it into dirt. I don't know. But it's darker than the white. Now the white really sticks out. And picked this muted, warm muted gray of the mountain back in there, just to be a backdrop behind the trees here. So simplified it a lot, and we'll still simplify it more, get rid of some of this junk that's underneath the boat. But that sets it up that I can think abstract shapes of the dark cast shadow, light road there, dark and light of the boat, dark and light of the trees, shape of the sky, and so on. A lot of shapes and variety of sizes there to work with. Think abstractly of how it pieces together before worrying about suggesting branches, leaves, grass. It's a simple composing of those abstract shapes and using the right effect of sunlight on it to make it work. Has nothing to do with detail. So think abstractly. It's really going to help your composition. Even though you're painting representational, use abstract to see things a little bit more clearly.